Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we step into the strangest waiting room you'll never remember entering. It's too bright. The light is that sterile, flickering fluorescence that makes every surface look like a dental clinic, and every decision you've ever made feel slightly worse. There's a buzzing sound overhead. Maybe a broken bulb, maybe a swarm of disappointed ancestors. You can't tell. There's no door behind you. Just this room, just now. And right in the middle, a desk, cheap plastic with a pen on a chain and a bowl of stale peppermints. You probably won't survive this one, but technically you already didn't. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. Curious night owls want to know who else is up right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes fully and realize there's a bell on the desk, the kind you'd find in a 1950s motel. You hesitate, then you tap it. Ding! Immediately, a puff of lavender-scented air whooshes down from the ceiling. The sound of shuffling paper echoes all around you. And then, someone clears their throat. Full name? The voice comes from a figure in a stiff gray suit. No gender, no age, just a blur of unplaceable features, and the world's worst posture. They're holding a clipboard that appears to be slightly smoking. You tell them your name, or maybe you just think it really hard. Either way, the clipboard lights up and scrolls itself like it's feeding into a fax machine from the underworld. Date of birth, date of death, they continue. You oblige, noticing that your date of death is today. Cute. The being doesn't smile. It scribbles something, then glances at you. Before we begin, let me just say, this is not a judgment. It's a survey. We value your feedback. You're not sure who "we" is, but before you can ask, the room rotates slightly. Not like it spins, but like you're now suddenly facing another part of it. And there's a chair. One of those office chairs with the wheel that always breaks. Please sit, it says. This is your postmortem interview. Standard protocol. You sit. The chair creaks in a way that sounds suspiciously like sarcasm. A projector screen unrolls in front of you. The lights dim just a bit, but not enough to feel cozy. Definitely not death with a side of marshmallow lighting. More like DMV at dusk. A film starts playing. It's you. Of course it's you. Not in a cinematic Oscar-worthy montage, no. It's more like old CCTV footage, grainy and too honest. You watch yourself fumble through a first kiss, yell at your mom over laundry, cry at a B-list romantic comedy you claim to hate. There's no narration, just that same lavender scent puffing out every few minutes, as if your shame needs to be aromatherapized. First impression? The being asks, tapping its clipboard. You shrug. Bit awkward. Good. That's healthy. They flip to a new page and the room dims further. The screen disappears. Now it's just you and them. A silence stretches too long. Then the being leans forward. Let's begin with satisfaction level. On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being deeply fulfilled, 1 being, well, let's say, should have taken the other path. How satisfied are you with your life? You laugh softly. Is this a trap? They don't answer. Just circle something and mutter, typical. You want to ask who else has been through this, whether they also had to sit on a chair missing one wheel and explain themselves to an eldritch HR rep. But instead, you ask a safer question. What happens if I say I'm not satisfied? Oh, nothing, the being replies. We just adjust your afterlife accordingly. Might be a spa day, might be a mandatory seminar, depends on funding. You lean back, glance around again. The room is still too bright, too bland, too neutral. But something in your chest is starting to fizz, a strange mix of anticipation and dread, like realizing your phone's autocorrect changed "love you" to "let's fight." They tap their pen. Let's try something simpler. What do you regret most? 1,000 memories scroll past your eyes, some loud, some small. That one email you never sent, the friend you stopped calling, the time you said "I'm fine" when you weren't, the job you stayed in too long, the the dream you paused and never unpaused. But what you actually say is, not traveling more. The being nods, almost bored. Yes, that's one of the top 3, along with worked too much and dated Kyle. You snort. I didn't date a Kyle. They scribble again. You came close, dodged a bullet. Then they add, with a tone too rehearsed, historians still argue whether regret is useful in the afterlife or just emotional luggage you overpacked. You blink. There are historians? Here? Oh yes, the being replies. They love it here. Nothing but time and moral ambiguity. The screen rolls back down. This time it shows something older, grainier. You, as a child, giggling at something off screen. You don't remember this day, but you remember the shoes. They were bright red, Velcro, iconic. You feel a knot tighten in your chest. You'll be surprised, the being says gently, how often people forget the days that actually mattered. You don't reply. You're too busy watching your younger self run toward a swing, arms open, hair messy, eyes lit. The being taps its pen once more. We'll revisit this feeling later. For now, let's move on to the audit. You don't ask what that means, because honestly, you're starting to get the sense that this interview is going to take a while. And somewhere, far beyond the fluorescent hum and existential paperwork, part of you kind of wants it to. Section 2. You don't feel the chair move, but it somehow repositions you. Now you're facing a different wall, and this time there's a low table in front of you. On it, a stack of manila folders, big ones, each labeled in thick red marker. Phase 1. The early years. The being sits across from you now, legs crossed, clipboard still glued to one hand. We like to start with childhood, it says casually, as though this is a book club, not a cosmic performance review. Some people find it nostalgic, others excruciating. Both responses are valid. With a wave of their other hand, the first folder opens itself. Inside, you, small, wild-eyed, covered in something suspiciously green. Possibly food, possibly nature, possibly something you convinced your babysitter to call war paint. You stare at the memory, which now hovers slightly above the table like a poorly edited hologram. The being squints. Age 4. Incident involving a turtle, a permanent marker, and an ice cream truck. You clear your throat. I was expressing myself. Expressive indeed. The turtle less impressed. The being jots a note. Then, more scenes flicker. Your kindergarten class, where you proudly declared Pluto your favorite planet, only to be informed that Pluto had just been demoted. You cried. For a week. Interesting loyalty to celestial underdogs, the being notes. You laugh a little. I still think it's a planet. They all say that. Next, it's the time you got lost in a grocery store and ended up announcing over the PA system that your family had abandoned you, and you would now live among the juice boxes. A bold plan. Very media forward. Then there's the time you asked your teacher what taxes were, and when she said, "Ask your parents," you responded, "I did." They cried. That gets a smile from the being. Sharp, early signs of satire. A pause, then it flips the folder closed. And now, report card review. You groan. Do we have to? The clipboard nods at you. Every soul says that. Every single one dot. The walls shift again. You're back in your elementary school hallway, except it's a liminal dream version. Lockers too tall, ceiling too low, everything echoing like it's wrapped in wool. Your childhood teacher appears, looking exactly as you half remember her. Kind face, terrifying authority, and the exact cardigan shade that haunted your spelling tests. She doesn't speak. She simply hands over a paper labeled Life Subject Mastery. Grades. Imagination. A. Kindness, B+. Obedience, D, with a smiley face. Curiosity, a plus, telling the truth. When it counts, C-. You flinch. That last one stings. We've found, the being murmurs, that many lives begin with great honesty until the world trains it out. You don't deny it. The screen behind you lights up again. This time it's a lunchroom scene. A friend asks if you like their drawing. You say, yes. You mean, sort of. You mostly mean, I don't want you to feel bad. You tell yourself that's kindness. But you knew even then that it wasn't the whole truth. Historians still argue, the being says, whether lying to protect feelings is noble or just convenient. You tilt your head. What do you think? I think it's above my pay grade. The table slides aside and now there's a swing set in its place. Not the memory of it, the real one somehow. You can smell the rust, the sun-baked rubber seat. The ground underneath is mulch and dust. You walk over and sit. It creaks softly. The same creak you remember. Except now, when you look up, you're eye level with your own childhood self. Legs pumping the air like you're trying to fly. You forget this is a postmortem review. You forget the soup being. You forget the overhead buzz. You just sit, watching your past self try to touch the clouds. You wanted to be a paleontologist, your younger voice pipes up. You chuckle. Yeah, for a while. And a magician. That too. What happened? You pause. You want to say life. You want to say school loans or reality or I forgot. But all that comes out is, I got busy. The swing slows. Your younger self kicks off, dust puffing up into the space between you. You promised you'd never get boring. Oof, the swing set fades. The smell of rust and mulch vanishes. The office chair reappears. Back to the clipboard. The being doesn't say anything for a moment, but you swear you hear something in its tone when it speaks again. Something softer. You did love deeply, it says. That counts. It turns the page. There's a new hologram. Your face, younger again, holding a dog. Or maybe a cat. It blinks. Definitely a cat. The kind you told secrets to, when people felt too dangerous. I told her everything, you say quietly. She never judged. You nod. Then another memory, a grandparent's lap, reading the same book for the 100th time. The feel of their sweater, the weight of their love, the moment they told you, you're enough. The first time you believed it, the last time you remembered. I forgot that. Most do. Silence again, but not empty. Full, like breath held. The clipboard shuffles its pages. And with that, Phase 1 is concluded. Please take a peppermint if needed. You don't reach for one. You just stare forward, still half sitting in that invisible swing, still hearing the echo of your childhood self whispering in your ear. Don't get boring. Section 3. You blink, and the peppermint bowl vanishes, along with any trace of the swing, the school, the cat. Now there's a desk. A real one this time, the cheap kind with the fake wood-grain veneer and a wobbly leg. On it, a computer monitor, the tower buzzing slightly beneath. Young adulthood, the being says, tugging at suit cuffs. The glitchiest phase of all. It waves a hand, and the monitor flares to life. You wince at the sheer chaos on screen. Tabs everywhere, windows stacked like geological layers, 3 different music players somehow competing at once. Ah yes, it murmurs, the era of reinvention and buffering. A folder opens. Phase 2, choices and chaos. You see yourself, now old enough to file taxes, but still young enough to cry about filing taxes. Staring blankly at a mirror in a rental bathroom that smells like bleach and forgotten ramen. You are trying on versions of yourself like clothes from a thrift store bin. There's career you, all blazers and spreadsheets. There's activist you, holding a sign, trying to speak truth to power, but also unsure what power looks like without its morning coffee. There's party you, smiling too widely, dancing too hard, laughing too loudly. You try each on. None of them quite fit. The being leans in. Your search for identity was endearingly frantic. You shrug. I was figuring things out. By downloading 74 self-help audiobooks you never finished. Hey, I got through at least 5. The being snorts softly. You're in good company. We find most souls binge self-discovery like snacks. Flavorful, fast, and rarely nutritious. You watch another scene. Your first apartment, which had more duct tape than furniture. You're microwaving something suspicious while arguing with a friend about whether success is internal or performative. The pasta explodes mid-sentence. No one wins the debate. Historians still argue, the being says, whether that dish was edible in the first place. You stifle a laugh. It was theoretically pasta. The memories shift again. This time, heartbreak. And not the romantic kind, though that's there too. Oh yes. The gut punch of a betrayal you never saw coming. The strange numbness that follows a friend's silence. The slow, bewildering death of idealism. One moment lingers. The exact second you realized someone you admired didn't actually stand for what they claimed. That one hurt, you whisper. Most soul fractures begin with disillusionment. The being nods. But you didn't shatter. You reshaped. And then there it is. Your resilience. Not loud, not heroic, just steady. You showed up to work after a funeral. You paid rent when your bank account gasped. You comforted someone else while your own world was crumbling. You didn't always succeed, but you always tried. The being taps the clipboard. Effort is heavily weighted. Good, you mutter, because that was kind of my whole thing. A new reel plays. Your first real job. You remember the badge, the mug, the chair that squeaked in a different pitch depending on your mood. You tried to be efficient. You tried to be impressive. You also once cried in the supply closet because a printer jam wouldn't quit, and neither would the existential dread. You laugh, but it's the kind that carries a sigh at the end. The being catches it. Your work ethic, it says, was both admirable and occasionally masochistic. I didn't know how to stop. You still don't. That lands. You look down. A new memory takes over the space. An email you almost didn't send. A message to someone who ended up changing everything. Not through romance, not through drama, but through presence. Quiet, reliable presence. That connection, the being says, was one of your most meaningful. You smile faintly. We didn't talk every day, but they always knew when to show up. That's what matters. The room tilts slightly like reality hiccups. The monitor blinks out, replaced by a handwritten journal. Yours. Late-night entries full of raw thought and shaky honesty. You wrote your truth when no one was watching, the being says gently. That's rare. You scoff. It felt safer than talking. Maybe. But it's also one of the few ways humans process without performance. You flip through the ghost pages of your thoughts. There are confessions here. Times you lied, times you stayed silent when you knew you shouldn't. But there are hopes, too. Dreams you whispered when no one else believed in them. Promises you tried to keep. The being doesn't judge, just lets the words sit there between you. Then, the turning point. A scene of you sitting on a park bench, watching life go by. People walking dogs, a toddler shrieking joyfully at a pigeon, someone playing music badly but loudly. You didn't do anything revolutionary that day. But for the first time in a long while, you felt okay with who you were. Just for a second. That, the being says, was the moment your soul unclenched. You blink. You remember that. The breeze. The bench paint flaking under your hand. The exact wrong lyrics the street guitarist was singing. Historians still argue whether he was ruining the song or improving it. You chuckle. Either way, the being continues. You stopped chasing perfection. You started being present. The journal closes. Congratulations, it says. You survived early adulthood, with only minor existential scarring. You exhale. What's next? The lights dim. Next, the being says with something like reverence, is when you started mattering to others in ways you never fully understood. Section 4. You don't feel the transition this time. One blink and you're in another place, another chapter, another version of yourself that somehow still smells faintly of burnt toast and ambition. The bench, the journal, they dissolve. What replaces them is a modest kitchen, faintly humming fridge, overripe bananas on the counter, a coffee mug that says, "World's okayest human." You're entering the anchor years, the being says, its voice softer now, like it doesn't want to break the fragile morning silence of memory. When choices ripple farther and sleep becomes sacred. You see yourself, late 20s, maybe early 30s, tired in a new way. Not from dancing or crying or overthinking, but from carrying the quiet weight of responsibility. The weight no one applauds you for. You're balancing bills on one side of your brain and someone else's emotions on the other. You're calming your friend at 2 a.m., drafting emails you won't send, and remembering to water the sad basil plant you somehow feel emotionally responsible for. You started managing emotional logistics like a one-person HR department, the being notes, except with worse coffee. You glance at your reflection in the microwave door. Same eyes, a little older, a little wiser, a little more aware that no one's coming to save you from yourself. The scene shifts to a phone vibrating in your lap. Bad news again. This time, it's family, health issues, distance, the guilt of not being able to fix things. You pause a moment too long before answering. That hesitation, the being sees it. You loved deeply, but even love has thresholds. You nod. I didn't always pick up. I didn't always know how. You weren't supposed to. You were still learning how to be. A new image. Your first real heartbreak as a functioning adult. Not the fiery crash of young love, but the cold drift of two people growing in different directions despite their best efforts. You're standing by the door. They're standing by the window. Neither one moves. Historians still argue whether love ends in silence or simply transforms into a different kind of longing. You let out a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. That breakup broke something, you whisper, and strengthened everything else, the being replies. The footage rewinds now, not to undo, but to replay with a different angle. The aftermath. You finding joy in smaller things. Your morning routine becomes a kind of meditation. You start buying fresh fruit on purpose. You call your grandmother more. You finally read that one book your mentor gave you years ago. You began rebuilding yourself, the being says, without fanfare, without witnesses. That's the real work. You catch a glimpse of your career path, less of a ladder, more of a hiking trail with questionable signage. One job bleeds into another. Some good, some hilariously bad. One boss had a desk full of crystals. Another had a full-blown spreadsheet of team birthdays. Neither helped with your dental plan. And yet, you grow. You pick up skills no one taught you. De-escalating passive-aggressive emails, pretending you understand project management jargon, leading meetings when you'd rather fake a fire alarm. You learned how to survive bureaucracy, the being chuckles, and how to professionally say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying. There's a flash of a birthday, your own, mid-30s. You're not thrilled. The party is low-key, fewer people than you expected, but someone baked a cake. Someone brought a playlist. Someone remembered that dumb inside joke from 5 years ago and printed it on a card. You laughed until you cried. That was the first year you stopped measuring your worth by how many people texted you, the being says. Progress. Another slide. A stranger crying on public transit and you offering them a tissue and a kind word. A coworker telling you, months later, that something you said in passing changed their mind about quitting. A niece showing you a drawing and saying, I made this 'cause you're cool. These moments, the being gestures, you rarely notice their impact, but they noticed you. You're quiet now, the kind of quiet that sinks into your ribs. Did I matter? You ask. The being looks at you directly. more than you'll ever know. And then comes the mistake. You wince even before the memory loads. It's that thing you said, that one choice, that time you let someone down when they needed you most. You try to stop the scene. You look away. The being doesn't. You disappointed someone, it says, and they never forgave you. I tried to make it right. You did. But healing is optional. Forgiveness isn't a transaction. The silence that follows feels like velvet, thick, soft, suffocating. Then, unexpectedly, a counterpoint, a different moment. Someone forgiving you without you even asking. Their exact words, "You don't owe me penance, just growth." You remember crying in your car after that. The being smiles gently. You made mistakes. You also learned from them. That counts. More memories flood in now, layered like a mixtape. Your first gray hair. Your new morning stretch that makes you sound like a haunted accordion. The realization that you actually like staying in. That reading is more fun than arguing. That kindness is a form of protest. You grew up, the being says simply. And you did. Quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. The lights dim again. You ready for the years when people start calling you wise? You snort. I barely figured out taxes. The being shrugs. That's part of the charm. Section 5. You're barely ready before the scene shifts again. No time for nostalgia this time. The years have accelerated, racing like a freight train powered by strong coffee and questionable decisions. Suddenly, you're in a place that smells like freshly waxed floors and faintly of regret. Middle adulthood. The being gestures broadly. Welcome to the crucible of expectations. You glance around. There's a family photo on the wall, smiling faces framed in gold. You reach out, almost touching the glass. The person in the photo looks like you, but with more laugh lines, a touch of gray at the temples, and a gaze both exhausted and proud. Your world now involves schedules tighter than your favorite jeans, obligations stacking up like unread emails. You're juggling careers, relationships, maybe kids, or aging parents, or both. The stakes feel higher, the consequences more permanent. Middle age is a dance, the being says, between who you were, who you hoped to be, and who you actually are. You watch yourself negotiating a crisis at work, speaking calmly but with a clenched jaw. You diffuse tension with dry humor, a skill honed by years of pretending you know exactly what you're doing. Remember the time you told your boss, "I'm not a magician, but I'll try"? The being laughs softly. You smirk. She did not appreciate that. Next, you see a scene of an argument with someone close, voices raised but eyes tired. You both say things you don't mean, then apologize hours later over lukewarm coffee. The fatigue of relationships is palpable. Historians still argue whether communication improves with age or just gets sneakier. You roll your eyes. I think it's sneakier. Then the scene shifts to a quiet moment alone. You're staring out a window, watching rain trace patterns on the glass. It's one of those rare pauses where the noise of daily life fades, just enough for you to hear your own thoughts and insecurities. You feel the weight of what ifs. What if you'd taken that other job? What if you'd been kinder? What if you'd called your mom more? The being nods sympathetically. Middle adulthood is ripe with what ifs, but also with hard-earned wisdom. You recall reading about Socrates, who said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Historians still debate whether he was the ultimate life coach or just had a flair for dramatic exits. You chuckle to yourself. Probably both. The being gestures, and a new memory plays. A community project you helped lead. Not a headline-grabbing event, just a neighborhood cleanup. But the smiles you shared, the hands you shook, the difference made, those moments matter. You realized influence isn't always about grand gestures, the being says. Sometimes it's in showing up. Then, a tougher scene. Health scare. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to shake your sense of invincibility. You find yourself reading more about nutrition, sleep, mindfulness, the vague self-help topics from your 20s coming back with new meaning. You try meditation. It mostly ends with you fighting off a sleep attack, or wondering if the cat judging you is spiritually enlightened. The being smirks. Mindfulness or cat judgment? Choose your poison. You laugh quietly. The scene shifts again, to your reflection in a mirror, this time seeing someone who has carried scars and joy alike, who has learned to forgive themselves for the times they stumbled. Historians still argue whether middle age is a crisis or a renaissance. You think about that. Maybe both, depending on the day. The being nods solemnly. You're learning to balance contradiction. You reach out, touching the reflection. You can almost feel the layers. Years of mistakes, triumphs, lost chances, and found purpose. It's messy, complicated, but unmistakably yours. The lights dim softly as the being's voice lowers to a whisper. Brace yourself, it says. The journey ahead is the one where you begin to understand what satisfaction really means. Section 6. You don't get a chance to savor the quiet. The scene shifts again, this time to a twilight landscape, a horizon that feels both distant and intimate. You're stepping into the later years, that mysterious stretch where reflection and reckoning mingle with an unexpected freedom. The being's tone softens. Welcome to your autumn, where the leaves aren't just falling, they're dancing. You see yourself slower now, movements deliberate, mornings gentler. There's a softness around your edges, like a well-loved sweater. You're less concerned with impressing others and more focused on savoring moments. The taste of a ripe peach, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of laughter that isn't yours, but feels like a shared secret. Your hands hold a photo album, edges worn from frequent handling. You flip through pages filled with faces, places, and milestones. Each picture, a tiny anchor to the past. You pause on one, a younger you, bright-eyed and hopeful. It's a little bittersweet, but you smile. You survived. More than survived. You thrived in ways you didn't expect. The being whispers, historians still argue whether wisdom is earned through age or experience alone. You know it's both. You laugh softly, recalling a quirky fact you once read. In ancient Egypt, some believed that gray hair was the sign of divine favor, or maybe just a side effect of too much sun and not enough sunscreen. Historians still debate which. The scene shifts to a quiet garden. You're planting flowers, the earth cool between your fingers. It's a small act of hope and patience, reminding you that life continues to grow, even when it feels fragile. There's a moment of unexpected humor. A bird lands on your shoulder, causing you to jump. Even the wildlife's got a sense of timing, you mutter. The being nods. Laughter is the best fertilizer. You watch a younger relative struggle with a decision. You offer advice, not as a lecture, but as a shared story. You realize how much your experiences have become a quiet guidepost for others. But this stage isn't without its shadows. There are moments of loneliness, memories of friends who've moved on, health concerns that whisper reminders of mortality. You sit by a window, watching the sunset bleed colors across the sky, feeling the weight of unfinished business. The being comforts. Satisfaction isn't about completion. It's about acceptance. You recall reading about the Stoics, who embraced impermanence with a shrug and a smirk. Fate loves irony, you say aloud. And you think about your own life's ironies, the moments you thought would define you but faded, and the quiet acts of kindness that became your true legacy. You close your eyes, breathing in the twilight calm. The being's voice fades to a soft murmur. Rest easy. The story continues beyond satisfaction. Section 7. You barely have time to blink before the scene shifts again. Now, you're drifting toward that twilight zone where memory and imagination intertwine, a place often reserved for the stories we tell ourselves about what we might have been. The being's voice is gentle but firm. Welcome to the realm of regrets and revelations. You find yourself back in your younger self's shoes, but the world looks different. less sharp edges, more muted colors. You notice the small choices that snowballed, the missed chances, the words left unsaid. A dinner table comes into focus. The air is thick with unspoken tension. A family argument simmering beneath polite conversation. You see yourself hesitating to speak up, biting your tongue to keep the peace. Historians still debate whether silence is wisdom or cowardice, the being notes with a hint of sarcasm. You smirk. I guess I've been both. A quirky detail emerges, that awkward moment when you wore mismatched socks to an important meeting, because you were half asleep and half distracted. The socks become a metaphor for the imperfect nature of your journey. You watch yourself try to mend a broken friendship, sending texts that go unanswered. The ache of uncertainty settles in. Yet there's also humor, like the time you accidentally sent a flirty message to the wrong contact. The panic, the relief, the ensuing jokes. You learn to laugh at your mistakes, the being reminds you. That's survival. You observe your attempts at self-improvement, joining yoga classes, reading self-help books, trying to meditate but falling asleep instead. Each effort a step toward better understanding yourself. A whispered debate floats in the background. Did these efforts change your life, or just make it more complicated? You shrug. A bit of both, honestly. Then a scene of kindness. You helping a stranger carry groceries. A small moment of connection in a world that often feels disconnected. The being's voice softens. In the end, these small acts weave the fabric of your story. You feel the tug of time, the past, the present, and the future, converging. Are you satisfied? The being asks quietly. You pause. The answer feels complex, layered like the years you've lived. Yes, you say finally, but also always reaching. The scene fades gently, leaving you with a sense of quiet hope. Section 8. Without warning, you're pulled forward again, this time into the stark brightness of a hospital waiting room. The sterile scent of antiseptic mixes oddly with the muffled hum of anxious whispers and the distant beep of monitors. You find yourself sitting alone, clutching a thin paper cup of lukewarm coffee, trying to steady your nerves. The being's voice lowers to a calm murmur. Here lies the crossroads of mortality and meaning. You watch yourself pacing, a restless energy born from waiting for news that could change everything. Your thoughts spiral between hope and dread, replaying memories like a slow-motion film. Historians still argue whether the concept of death anxiety is modern or as ancient as humankind itself. You remember a quirky tidbit. In medieval Europe, people held death dances, theatrical performances reminding everyone that no matter your rank, death comes for you. It's like a grim comedy, one you never asked to audition for, but somehow always participate in. You take a shaky sip of coffee and notice the clock ticking relentlessly, each second echoing in your chest. Flashbacks swirl around you, moments of laughter with loved ones, old arguments, promises made and broken. You try to hold on to the warmth of those memories, like a lifeline. Then, a nurse enters with news. Your breath catches, heart pounding in your ears. The scene changes. Now you're inside the hospital room, watching a loved one lying fragile, eyes flickering with awareness. You reach out, fingers brushing cold skin, and you speak softly, words tumbling out in a jumble of hope and fear. The being whispers, "Caregiving is a silent hero's journey." You reflect on how this moment feels timeless, yet profoundly personal. You're neither doctor nor patient, but the tether between worlds. The scene shifts again, to the quiet moments after, when grief settles like dust, heavy and suffocating, yet strangely grounding. You find yourself in a park, the sun dipping low. You sit on a bench, watching children play, their laughter a balm. Historians debate how societies have ritualized grief across centuries, the being says. From wailing rites to silent vigils, each culture finds its own way. You smile wryly, thinking about your own awkward attempts at mourning. Awkward hugs, misplaced condolences, the endless, "How are you?" that feels like a test. Yet, amid the pain, there's a spark, a flicker of resilience, the fragile thread of moving forward. You breathe deeply, feeling the bittersweet balance of loss and love. "Are you satisfied?" the being asks softly. You nod, realizing that satisfaction sometimes means accepting the impermanence of all things. The scene dims, the hospital noises fading into the quiet hum of night. Section 9. The scene shifts again, this time to a cramped, dimly lit room filled with the buzzing of a neon sign outside the window. You're sitting at a worn wooden table, nursing a cup of black coffee that's long since gone cold. The night has deepened, but the world outside feels restless, alive with stories you're only just beginning to understand. The being's voice drifts softly. "Welcome to the underbelly, the hidden chapters of society where shadows tell their own tales." You observe the people around you, a mix of dreamers, drifters, and survivors. Some talk in hushed tones about their struggles with addiction, homelessness, and the scars life has left on them. Their stories unfold like fragile origami, complex, painful, yet somehow beautiful. Historians still debate whether poverty is a product of circumstance or systemic failure. You listen to a man recount how he lost his job due to automation, something you read about recently. The Industrial Revolution's impact was catastrophic in some regions, but today's tech-driven shifts are rewriting the rules faster than anyone can keep up. A quirky detail catches your attention. One woman's tattoo, a tiny spaceship with the words "to the stars," a symbol of hope in the darkest nights. You're drawn into conversations that weave humor with heartbreak. A woman jokes, "If I had $1 for every time I heard 'get a job,' I'd own the city." You chuckle, appreciating the resilience that humor brings, even in the bleakest situations. The being whispers, "Survival often wears a mask of laughter." You watch an impromptu card game break out, laughter spilling despite the harsh surroundings. It reminds you of a historical fact. During the Great Depression, makeshift games and communal gatherings were lifelines for many. You notice your own reflection in the window, older, tired, but unbroken. Historians argue whether charity alleviates or perpetuates poverty, the being muses. You think about the times you've offered help, and the times you've turned away, and the complex dance between empathy and helplessness. The neon flickers as dawn approaches, casting a surreal glow. You feel the weight of these stories, knowing they are threads in the vast fabric of humanity. "Are you satisfied?" the being asks gently. You sigh, the answer more complicated than ever. The scene fades as the city wakes, the promise of a new day lingering. Section 10. You find yourself transported again, this time to a bustling city street under the veil of twilight. The sounds of traffic mingle with distant laughter, the occasional honk, and the rhythmic clack of shoes against pavement. You walk through crowds of strangers, each carrying their own hidden stories, stories you're suddenly allowed to glimpse. The being's voice hums softly. This is the theater of human ambition and anonymity. You watch as people rush past, faces lit by phone screens, lost in their private worlds. Among them, a street performer captivates a small crowd, juggling fire with effortless grace. His smile is contagious, even in the fleeting moments you catch. Historians still debate whether public spaces encourage community or foster isolation. You recall the curious fact that Paris was among the first cities to introduce public benches in the 19th century, to encourage socializing but also to control the urban poor. Your eyes follow a young woman darting through the crowd, headphones on, nodding to music only she can hear. You wonder about her dreams, the stories hidden beneath her headphones. A vendor calls out, selling street food with enthusiasm, the scent of spices teasing your senses. You remember a quirky tidbit. Street food is one of the oldest culinary traditions, dating back thousands of years to ancient Rome's Thermopolia. You chuckle, imagining emperors munching on ancient pizza slices while debating politics. The being muses, even the grandest empires thrive on the humblest meals. You notice a subtle tension beneath the city's vibrant energy. A homeless man shivering against a building wall, invisible to many passers-by. You're reminded of the open debate among scholars about gentrification. Revitalizing neighborhoods often means pushing out those who once made them alive. You pause, your heart tight, as a child offers the man a sandwich. Kindness, however small, is a radical act, the being says quietly. You watch as the city continues to pulse with life, hope, struggle, joy, and sorrow, all wrapped in the same breath. Are you satisfied? The being asks again. You nod slowly, realizing satisfaction isn't a destination but a fleeting moment amidst chaos. The lights dim and the cityscape blurs into a soft haze. Section 11. You're suddenly somewhere quieter, an old library, dust motes floating lazily in shafts of golden light. The scent of aged paper and leather bindings wraps around you like a familiar blanket. You run your fingers along the spines of books that have witnessed centuries of human thought and folly. The being's voice is calm and reverent. Welcome to the sanctuary of stories, where history breathes. You pull out a tome, flipping pages with care. You read about forgotten revolutions, lost inventions, and the lives of ordinary people whose names never made headlines, but whose actions rippled through time. Historians still debate the impact of individual agency versus larger societal forces. You come across a quirky fact. The Great Library of Alexandria may have held more scrolls than any modern library holds books, yet it was destroyed multiple times. Some say by accident, others by deliberate acts of erasure. You smile, thinking about how knowledge can be both fragile and powerful. The being whispers, "Our stories survive because we tell them, even when they're inconvenient." You settle into a quiet corner, feeling the weight and warmth of collective memory. You recall the debates about which stories get told and which get buried. There's humor in the margins, marginalia where readers centuries ago doodled caricatures or snarky comments about the text. You laugh softly at a drawing of a medieval monk giving a thumbs up to a particularly dull passage. The being nods. Even back then, people had a sense of humor about knowledge. You think about how the past shapes you, and how your own story will one day become a thread in the tapestry. You feel a sense of peace mixed with the restless urge to keep learning, keep questioning. Are you satisfied? The being asks gently. You realize satisfaction is knowing that your story, like these books, will continue to be told in some form. The library fades into the twilight, the scent of old pages lingering. Section 12. The scene shifts once more, and you're now standing at the edge of a vast desert, the sun low and molten on the horizon. The wind carries whispers of ancient secrets, sand shifting beneath your feet like memories in motion. The vast emptiness stretches out, both intimidating and strangely comforting. The being's voice is soft but steady. Here, in the silence, you confront the raw essence of survival and solitude. You watch as a solitary traveler trudges forward, footprints marking a path that will soon be erased by the relentless wind. The scene calls to mind the stories of early desert explorers, whose courage and folly shaped the maps we trust today. Historians still argue whether these explorers were heroes or harbingers of destruction for the native peoples. You think of a quirky fact. In ancient Egypt, the desert was seen not just as a barren wasteland, but a sacred place where gods dwelled, and journeys into it were spiritual quests. You feel the dry heat against your skin, the sharp contrast of night's cold that follows. The traveler pauses to drink from a small, cracked water skin, each drop a treasure. You consider how water scarcity remains one of humanity's most pressing issues, a topic of endless debate among scientists and policymakers. You smile wryly, remembering that some desert nomads use camel dung to build homes and even as fuel, a fascinating adaptation blending necessity and ingenuity. The being whispers, "In harshest conditions, life finds a way, often in unexpected forms." You sense the traveler's loneliness, but also their resilience, the quiet determination to press on despite the odds. You reflect on your own moments of solitude, how they shaped your inner landscape as much as any grand adventure. Are you satisfied? The being asks, voice barely above the wind. You inhale deeply, the desert's vastness mirroring the expanse inside you, sometimes empty, sometimes full, always changing. The sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows that merge into the twilight. Section 13. You find yourself back in a bustling urban hospital, but this time the atmosphere is different. More urgent, more raw. You're in a narrow corridor lined with flickering fluorescent lights that hum softly overhead. The smell of antiseptic mixes with the faint metallic scent of urgency. Nurses and doctors move briskly past you, faces tight with concentration. The being's voice is quiet, but insistent. This is where life hangs by a thread, and decisions echo beyond the moment. You watch a team working to stabilize a patient, a frantic ballet of equipment, commands, and quick thinking. The energy is electric yet soaked with tension, a dance played out countless times but never the same. Historians still debate whether the rise of modern medicine has extended life or prolonged suffering. You recall a quirky tidbit. In the 18th century, doctors often wore beak-like masks filled with aromatic herbs to protect themselves from miasma, an outdated but oddly theatrical approach to infection control. You grin, picturing those masked figures marching through plague-stricken streets like characters from a Gothic novel. The being whispers, "Science advances in leaps, but always shadows of doubt." You witness the difficult choices doctors face, triage, resource allocation, moments where the margin between life and death is paper thin. You remember stories of battlefield medics who improvised with what little they had, turning desperation into innovation. A nurse cracks a joke to lighten the mood, a rare moment of humor amid the pressure. You appreciate how laughter becomes a shield, a reminder that even here, humanity persists. Are you satisfied? The being asks gently, voice barely audible over the hurried footsteps. You nod, feeling the weight and wonder of the moment. The corridor's harsh lights soften as the scene fades, leaving a calm hush in its wake. Section 14. The scene shifts again, and you find yourself in a cozy, dimly lit kitchen, the soft clinking of cups and the warm aroma of brewing tea enveloping you. Outside, rain patters gently against the window pane, a soothing rhythm that contrasts with the heavy topics you've been tracing. The being's voice is gentle, almost a whisper. Here, in the quiet moments, we gather our thoughts and confront our truths. You watch yourself sit across from a close friend, the conversation flowing easily despite the weight of the world outside. They share a story about kindness in unexpected places, a moment where humanity's best shines through the cracks. Historians still argue whether personal acts of kindness can truly counterbalance systemic injustice. You think of a quirky fact. In Japan, the tradition of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, turning damage into art, a beautiful metaphor for healing. You smile softly, the image settling warmly. The conversation drifts to resilience, the way people rebuild, even after profound loss or hardship. You recall that laughter often returns first, like a fragile bloom after a long winter, and how humor has been a coping mechanism across cultures. Even in darkest times, humor survives, the being murmurs. You sip your tea, the warmth spreading through you, grounding and calming. The rain slows, the world outside muted and serene. Are you satisfied? The being asks once more. You nod, feeling a gentle peace, a sense of connection to the enduring human spirit. The kitchen's soft glow fades into twilight, wrapping you in quiet comfort. Section 15. You drift into a twilight realm, a liminal space where memories, hopes, and reflections swirl like mist. The being's voice is low, comforting, carrying you gently toward the close of this long journey. Here, at the end, we look back on the stories we've shared, threads woven into the fabric of a life. You revisit the moments, the whispered secrets, the laughter, the pain, the quiet resilience. Each scene a mosaic piece, imperfect yet vital. You consider a historical fact. Many ancient cultures practiced ritual storytelling to pass down wisdom, preserve identity, and foster community. You find a quirky detail, a forgotten myth about a spirit who listens to the dead's last words, believed to carry their truths into the afterlife. You smile, recognizing that the dialogue between life and death is as old as time itself. The being muses. Historians still debate the nature of the soul and what stories survive beyond. You reflect on your own story, its uncertainties, its satisfaction, its unfinished edges. A soft breeze stirs, carrying the scent of rain and earth, mingling with the distant sound of a lullaby. You feel the weight of the journey lighten, the images soften, and a deep calm settle over you. Are you satisfied? The being asks one final time. You answer not with words, but with a quiet acceptance, knowing that some questions remain, but the journey itself is enough. The mist fades, leaving you in a peaceful darkness, cradled by the night. Now, as the night stretches around you like a familiar quilt, feel your breath slow and your muscles relax. The stories have woven their way into your thoughts, lingering softly like a half-remembered dream. You might find yourself carrying some of their questions, others their warmth. That's okay. Uncertainty is part of the human story. Remember, every ending holds the seed of a new beginning, and within you is a quiet strength that carries forward, no matter what shadows you've faced. Let the gentle darkness cradle you, a space for rest and renewal. Soon, the edges of your thoughts blur, the world grows soft, and sleep gently pulls you under. Rest easy, knowing these stories live on, not just in memory, but in every breath you take. Sweet dreams.